it's left hand or right winger again. Just I know I did my presidential series before, didn't quite finish it, but after rewatching, I thought it'd be a good way to kind of clean it up and kind of simplify the process. So and to make it interesting, I think I'm just going to make a video at a time on each president, clean it up, and then mostly talk about each individual president, and then make a playlist. And rather than going in my order, we're just going to go in chronological order, and then I'm going to space them out in the playlist so you can then see my ranking after the fact. It'll give us something kind of evolution wise and fun to watch. But so we'll just start with number one, George Washington. And he will in the end rank up about in third place. You'll see as we go along, and we've seen him move around a little bit. Um, but it largely comes down to his emphasis. Well, he was really proud on being the first president. He knew everything he'd done was going to take a precedence. Everything he decided to do, every opinion he took was something he was going to take. I mean, his whole idea, when it was time for reelection, he didn't want a second term. He got really pushed into it. And he also thought it would kind of a better thing for the country because there was a lot of um, differing things. I mean, we had the birth of the anti-federalist. I mean, the idea was we wanted a strong, centralized federal government. Um, but then there were some that really part of emphasizing freedom. There's the Thomas Jeffersons and the James Madisons who wanted to separate from that and make it more of, essentially how we formed it later on. The original Republican Party, often called the Democratic Republicans, they kind of wanted more power spread out amongst the states. And Washington was great to kind of stop that divide. Like he was a good mediator to bring them together, and that's part why he said, "All right, I'll run for a second term." And it was very difficult for him to stop after the second term. He really didn't want to again, but he kind of put his foot down there and said, "No, two is two is enough. We don't need any more." But it's just something about his leadership style that is perfect. And I only going to say it again because he was very I would say modest about it. Like he didn't want to step further than he had to or needed to. He just kind of was there, stepped in where it was appropriate. He made. I mean, it was a big idea. He said, we don't need to go to war. We don't need to, go to war with our enemies. Like there's some debate with Britain and France at the time, and he said, we just won't get involved. Some people thought that because the military has the right to declare war, I mean, rather the Congress will declare war, the president didn't have a right to claim neutrality. And in fact, that's what he did. But no, it's a smart move because why get out there if we didn't need to? Let's just mind our own business and everything will be fine. And he did that really well. He did not want to be king. Even there were some that thought, hey, right after the end of the American Revolution, he should stand up, take over the country as the new king. He didn't want it. And that's part of what we hadn't up with the Articles of Confederation before we got the Constitution. And even then, he wasn't really hardcore about being president either. Um, but eventually, the way things sounded, he became that person. And in many ways, he's probably because of the American Revolution, prior up until his death, probably the most popular American in history at that time. He was the biggest name you could think of. Anybody heard the name Washington, it was someone people looked up to. And what's interesting too is that I appreciate his having been a general in the American Revolution. We can go on, but his leadership is during the American Revolution. But he tried to carry that into the White House, which I think in the beginning well, put it this way, we've kind of faded away from the role of commander in chief as being really a military role. I mean, right now it kind of ends up almost being like a figurehead because, like with Washington, we had the Whiskey Rebellion, which was an interesting test that Washington had to kind of say about, are we supposed to pay taxes at all? Hey, we went to an American Revolution not to pay taxes, but now we're going to pay them. And the Whiskey Rebellion, they didn't want to pay a tax on whiskey. So Washington put on his whole military uniform, took out troops to stop them. And of course, they saw that, they heard that, and the rebels got scared and they backed down and ended the war very, very quick. But it's interesting because nowadays I don't think any president has really donned the uniform. We've only had a few that have gone onto the front line, so to speak, and not really that many or that much or that long. Washington was prepared to think of that. His main thing was being the head of the military directly and directly involved in it. It almost seems it's become kind of a passive role in some ways. I like the way, at least what way Washington look at it. And it's not to say that it faded away very quickly, because we'll talk about later on. James Madison kind of did the same idea, kind of putting on the uniform. And I don't think he had much military experience either. I don't think he served in the Revolution, but he would command the men during the War of 1812. But anyway, Washington definitely is, like the number three of all time. We can go on to his, the few that are better than him, but it's just because of his leadership style and the way he was able to bring the country together. I don't know about today politically, but Washington could have been elected and elected and elected. He could have served. He could have probably served several terms in office, and nobody would have stopped him, because he was just so popular and everybody liked him, and he did the right things. And I don't know politically as if to nowadays if he would have been viewed the same way, because everybody wanted to look at somebody's past and some of their opinions on things. I don't know, but he's definitely one of the best, and probably at least, well, as you'll see, he's probably going to be the number one president for a long time, at least as far as this video shows as I go through the history. But he falls at number three for me of all. But we'll come into that as we go along, and talk to you soon. Bye.